For those of you who don't know who Pat McAfee is, he is a former Colts punter, and he has, since his retirement in the NFL, has built up what is a pretty impressive media presence online. He bounced around with Barstool Sports. He was on Sirius XM for a while, and he signed a big old deal with FanDuel not that long ago. Recently, there had been rumblings that perhaps he was going to be moving to ESPN, which in his community created a lot of negative feedback, which is totally understandable. Things that work on the internet typically do not translate over to television. Even Pat McAfee himself, in years past, as fans have been pointing out, has said that he will never be an ESPN personality because he's not really capable of it. But here we are a couple years later, and he has grown into this, as to what could be argued as the number one internet sports talk show. I mean, it's really insane. I've been following Pat McAfee for a number of years on this, and I sort of want to dive into this a little bit and give sort of the feedback from his fans, sort of my personal take on the whole situation, and sort of what Pat has said publicly. It's totally understandable for fans to be upset about this move. It's totally understandable for fans to be confused and not understand what does this mean for the future of the show. And in my estimation, I don't think Pat's actually done a great job of explaining what this means for the future of the show. I don't think it's as bad as a lot of fans are making it out to be. I think it's a lot more volatile than it necessarily needs to be. So what are the main concerns? The main concerns from fans are that ESPN, as a network owned by the Walt Disney Corporation, are going to fundamentally change who Pat is and who the rest of the cast are, which, to a degree, they probably will, because there are certain rules that you have to follow to be on television. Now, does this mean that the whole show is going to be forced into a traditional ESPN format? I don't know. I personally don't see that happening. But again, this falls more into the why hasn't Pat said anything about this particular concern. And to Pat's credit, I don't think fans are giving him a lot of wiggle room in this regard. I think it's understandable for him to be immediately defensive because the immediate reaction was overwhelmingly negative. It was overwhelmingly aggressive. So it's understandable why, when you're met with this incredible wave of negativity, why you might be a little bit defensive. And maybe that doesn't create an environment that's conducive to sharing things. Now, the other thing is, we might not know what Pat can and cannot share with the rest of us. But at the same time, it would be nice as a fan to know a little bit about something. I mean, there have been bits and pieces that we've picked out over the last couple days talking. It's going to be like a 2-hour show versus like a 3-hour show. There's a lot of questions. Will Ian Rappaport be able to continue to be on the show? There are a lot of questions that Pat just has flatly refused to answer. On the other side of this, I think fans are way overreacting to this. This is not doom and gloom. Changes happen. Not all change is bad. And we have to, kind of allow some time for these changes to take shape. The way that the show is now is not the way that the show was a year ago, or the year before that, or the year before that. The show has continued to change and evolve. Some things work, some things don't work. That's the nature of content creation. I personally don't see this as necessarily a bad thing. I think a lot of people have been complaining that ESPN isn't the way it used to be. It's not the cool place for sports talk anymore, and it hasn't been for almost 30 years. But doesn't that make sense then to go after what is the number one modern sports talk show and bring that to your platform? I personally don't see ESPN wanting to change that, because then that changes nothing. That doesn't move anyone over to their platform. That will just create a vacuum for somebody else and fill the YouTube space. This just reads as the typical internet unwilling to change thing. Any change is bad. Anything I don't like is bad. And, that is what it is. I think fans are totally justified in their confusion and anger. And I think Pat is totally justified in his defensiveness, because you haven't created a room for conversation. Now, where do I line in on this? I personally am excited for the ESPN deal, because I think if this works out the way that Pat seems to think it will, it'll only be good for everybody involved. Moving a show that I already like, that I already think is the best place for sports talk, that I already think is the best personality for sports, and moving that to a platform that has traditionally been not so great for what I like, it'll create competition. It'll force these other shows to get better. Because if everybody moves over to Pat's show and is like, oh, this is phenomenal, I like this, I like that, I like this, those other shows are going to be like, okay, what's going on? And then the content and the formatting that people haven't liked will be forced to change. I think that's a good thing, if that is what really happens. I think a lot of fans overreact to Disney in general. I think that the MCU's in shambles crowd is grossly misguided. Star Wars isn't dead. All of these things. It's just you're so anti-Disney that you're looking through rage goggles. You're like, everything is bad. Blah, I hate everything. Let's look at things individually. We don't know, so let's not assume anything about this deal. Let's not assume that this will fundamentally change the show just because it's Walt Disney. Yeah, they might have to stop swearing. I don't think in order to create great content you need to swear. That's just my opinion on it. Personally, my metric of a good comedian is being able to make me laugh without using language, because I think sometimes language is just a cheap way to get a laugh. So I think the real skill of a presenter is being able to put yourself in a box and still create the content that we all love. To me, this reads more of a Dylan going electric situation, that this thing that had been niche and mine for so many years is becoming mainstream. And I really read it more as like people being upset that my thing is now for everybody, so I'm going to leave it behind. To me, it's no different than when an indie band gets a record and it's like, well, I can't, do that anymore. To me, you just come off as like sports hipsters. I'm sorry to say it. I know you won't like that. And you're like, no, it's different. I'm different. When I say it, it's different. To me, it's not. I could be totally wrong. And if I am wrong and they go to ESPN and the show stinks, then you know what? We'll stop watching. But we can't pre-decide. Maybe ESPN really is trying to usher in a new era of content on their platform. I think that's only a good thing. I think if we have something that we love and it's going to force other people to create content similar or to up their game and create better content, that's only a net positive for all of us sports fans. I think there are some negatives with this, and I don't think Pat has handled this in the most mature way possible. But I also think that the fans haven't necessarily allowed him the space to react in the mature way possible. It's not conducive for conversation, especially if you're going on his wife's Instagram, and, that's... Come on, of course he's going to be defensive about that. And there might be people in the comments saying like, oh, you're just a Pat McAfee meat writer and whatever. I don't see it that way. I'm just trying to be open to conversation. I understand why you're upset. I understand why Pat was defensive. I understand that I think both parties need to chill out and allow conversation. I do think it would be in everybody's best interest if Pat was like, okay, here's what we're thinking as far as formatting goes. Here's what's going to be different. Here's exactly what's going to be the same. Beyond like, oh, they're going to handle the back end so we can focus on content. I don't think a lot of people even knows what that necessarily means. They view it as coming in and being like, oh, well, ESPN's going to control the show. And, maybe. But we don't know because nobody's told us fans what exactly this move entails as far as what the direct content of the show will be. Ultimately, I think it's a good move for sports media and sports fans. I think that Pat deserves the success that he's had. He's made it. He built this, and I think that's awesome. I think anybody who builds themselves up to this level should be celebrated. I also think that he has done a poor job communicating with fans. I think fans are right to be upset about this situation, and they are right to be confused. I don't think they are right to be angry and be so blinded by rage and confusion that you're just swinging wildly at this person that you say you love. Yeah, you can be angry at the person you love, but come on, man. You really think that there's going to be any open communication if you're going around like clown shoes and sellouts and all that stuff. No, come on. It'll be very interesting to follow this story and see what comes from here.